The president has made reducing trade deficits a primary goal of international economic policy, ignoring the views of mainstream economists who view trade deficits as more a consequence of investment and savings decisions than a scorecard of national success. To that end, he has demanded that the Chinese work to reduce the $335 billion, $442 billion trade deficit by $200 billion. A joint statement from American and Chinese negotiators emphasized meaningful increases in United States agriculture and energy exports. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin on Monday emphasized the potential for China to buy liquefied natural gas. And the president tweeted that under a potential deal, China would buy practically as much as our farmers can produce. If those purchases materialize, there could be political dividends for the president. U.S. farmers have much to lose from a potential Chinese trade war, and stepped-up Chinese purchases of American soybeans and other commodities could be a boon. If those purchases are large enough to move the dial on the overall trade deficit with China, it would create an easy-to-measure win for the president on his pet issue. "This is the stuff you can count and measure," said Gary Clyde Hufbauer, a trade scholar with the Peterson Institute for International Economics. It's short-term and instantaneous. The administration's approach might quickly reduce the headline level of the trade deficit, but it largely ignores the frustrations of U.S. sectors that are the most promising sources for creating future good export-related jobs. Loading gas companies that make automobiles, semiconductors and other complex products bemoan Chinese government requirements that force U.S. firms to form joint ventures with Chinese companies, sharing their technology. They accuse those partners of widespread theft of intellectual property as they try to catch up in advanced technologies. Many U.S. firms face Chinese competition that receives heavy state subsidies. These are some of the most stubborn, long-standing issues in U.S.-Chinese economic relations. But they aren't likely to be fixed overnight, and even if the United States wins concessions, it won't necessarily affect the trade deficit, especially in the next couple of years. This helps explain why some prominent advocates of a tougher stance toward China, who applauded President Donald Trump's tariff threats, are critical of the turn the negotiations have taken. The tariffs the president threatened are designed to address China's technology theft and their plans to dominate advanced and high-technology manufacturing, said Dan DeMicco, chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, which advocates for a hardline stance, in a statement. By contrast, an agreement to sell agricultural and energy commodities is the result of bad negotiating and bad economic strategy. Exports of agriculture were directly or indirectly responsible for 524,000 jobs in 2014, according to analysis by the International Trade Administration. Petroleum and coal products were responsible for an additional 255,000. But combined, that is less than 7% of the jobs tied to exports that year. Sectors like computers and electronic products and machinery were responsible for substantially more export-related jobs. Hufbauer notes similarities with a strategy that U.S. trade negotiators pursued with Japan in the 1980s, of voluntary import agreements, in which the Japanese agreed to import more American semiconductors and other products. Whatever the near-term benefits for particular U.S. exporters, Japanese trade surpluses kept rising. In some ways, the back-and-forth with China in recent days fits a common Trump negotiating pattern: threaten bold, potentially disruptive action while making major demands, then seek a deal that is considerably more incremental. Even some who are critical of the administration see value in more systemic rethinking of the relationship between the United States and China. Trade is not stuff of immovable structural forces of globalization, said Jennifer Harris, a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute and former State Department official. These are political choices that were made, and they could be unmade. So I disagree with a lot of the specific policy choices, but I at least appreciate the space Trump is opening up for us to remind ourselves how much agency we have. But, she added, in this round of negotiations, it's not clear what we're getting for a lot of the concessions that have been made. The Trump administration negotiating team has deep internal fissures, and this is an area where the hardliners, including U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, are advocating the path that includes the highest risk of near-term economic disruption but also the greater likelihood of shifting the Chinese-U.S. economic relationship in the longer run. The thing to watch in the weeks ahead is whether the administration faction seeking short-term wins and trade peace continues to prevail. The New York Times traded Donald Trump's analysis.